Hi everyone. Today we're talking about lessons from a multicultural experience. What could we learn from living and working in different cultures? How does culture impact maths ability? What can speaking more than one language teach us about communication? Joining us for this discussion to answer some of these questions is Win-Li Toh, an experienced actuary who's well known for her significant contribution to the profession. And she's had an international career spanning more than 25 years. Win-Li was born in Malaysia and has lived and worked across several different cultures around the world before moving to New Zealand, which is where she's based now. A principal at Taylor Fry, Win-Li is also the Senior Vice President of the Actuaries Institute, and she was named 2023 Insurance Leader of the Year. She's regularly approached to share her commentary on critical issues affecting insurers and the community, like affordability and cyber vulnerabilities. Win-Li, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm super excited to have this conversation because you and I have different backgrounds in that regard. Because I was born, raised, and still live a stone's throw from Sydney in Australia, and I haven't really travelled very much at all. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your stories and experiences from your multicultural experience.
Thank you.
But first, I want to ask you the question that I ask all my guests, and it's this. Win-Li, how do you use your actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world?
Okay. I use my actuarial superpowers in general insurance. So I advise insurers, self-insurers, and government in both Australia and New Zealand, mostly as an appointed actuary, but also in providing strategic and policy advice to boards and management. So I see actuaries as natural problem solvers, Julia. We thrive on finding solutions to complex challenges. And certainly the insurance industry has its fair share of
So
challenges.
true.
So making a difference in the world for me
Mm.
is really about rising to those challenges by finally balancing the need for insurer financial sustainability while never losing sight of the purpose of insurance, which is to protect people at their most vulnerable so they're not alone in a calamity. And that's, where I think I most flex my actual superpowers.
I love that, Winley. And I love the way that you describe it as, supporting insurance and its purpose. I think sometimes as actuaries, we can feel like we use our skills by coming up with a price of a premium or coming up with a calculation for a reserve, but it's more than that, isn't it? And I really love the way you've articulated that.
Thank you. I think you're right. We enjoy the intellectual challenge, or we all do, but
Mm,
we lose sight of why, why are we
mm,
doing this? The
mm,
social purpose of it, who is at the end of it. And I
mm.
think that's really important to keep in mind and
Yeah.
balancing that, sound financial system with, you're actually producing something that's helping people in need.
Such an important purpose, such an important role. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. So that's how you use your actuarial superpowers. But as well as what you're doing as an actuary, you've had this incredible multicultural career and life. You've worked across different countries. You've lived and studied across different countries. Can you tell us a bit about the countries that you've lived and worked in?
Okay. I'll start from the beginning. I was born and I grew up in Ipoh, which was then a small, reasonably quiet mining town in Malaysia, but now is a thriving metropolis. And it's been made famous recently by Michelle Yeoh, the she of, first Asian Oscar winner fame. Uh,
Yep,
so, you can imagine everyone in Ipoh is very, very proud of that.
of
So I
course.
grew up surrounded by a gazillion cousins, riding my little bicycle all over town, and doing all my lessons like in the Malay language, Bahasa Malaysia, till I was sort of in my mid-teens. Then
Mm.
in my later secondary years, I had the opportunity to go to England and I went to a lovely girls' school, the Cheltenham Ladies College,
Uh-huh.
in the beautiful Cotswolds in England.
Wow.
Actually, that's an interesting fact about Cheltenham I just thought about.
Mm.
Cheltenham houses the top secret GCHQ. It's think MI5 or MI6, tucked away in this little market town in the, verdant green hills of England. Anyway,
Right.
I thought that was quite interesting. That was followed by a pure maths degree in Oxford University with its own deep history and its own unique culture again, and a sense of, I think, great minds, solving the world's problems together. So that was a really exhilarating time.
Mm.
So then armed with my pure maths degree, I thought, from Oxford, what should I do with it now? And, I enjoyed it, but never thought about a career that, using that degree. So I went to a careers fair in London, and came across two charismatic female actuaries. Much like ourselves, Julia,
Wow.
you and me. No, I'm just joking. But they do. So they were really attracted me to the profession. I thought, wow, these ladies love maths. They love,
Wow.
and they can talk, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, and I love that. And that's where my actuarial journey began. So
Wow.
within 48 hours, I got my first job. Like, I went for interview and I literally gave me a job like there and then as an actuarial consultant right in the beating heart of London. So I didn't have this sort of, 1 year look forward to your career. It was just like quite random,
It
I
just
guess.
happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then a few years later, I thought of being a lawyer. I thought, what should I do with this? But I thought, oh, I can use my maths, and something. So then, a few years later, I really enjoy London. I still probably, do love London. But a few years later, on a whim and, looking at this really well-crafted ad about the beautiful New Zealand surf and great walks and stuff, that
Yep.
took me to New Zealand,
Mm.
ostensibly for a year. And that was in the 1990s. And then to Australia, where I work, as I mentioned, as a consulting actuary with Taylor Fry. And here I
Mm.
still am, more than 20
Mm.
years later.
Mm.
Um, I've always been a consultant. I find that it combines my love of maths, people, and problem solving. I just love this job, so I've never thought of doing anything else. And
Mm.
and
Mm. Well,
actually, when I was,
that is something
yeah,
that we have in common, Win-Li. I've been a
yeah,
consultant my whole career as well, and I love that combination of people and solving problems and working together to do interesting things. It's
that's right.
such a fun blend of work.
I think that's right. People say, "Oh, why don't you work in corporate to get the actual, hands-on experience?" But I think if you're like me or you, just a natural busybody, I'm like, "Oh, hand over the work, but what are you going to do with it? Is it useful? That did it work? What
Yes.
is it? Who is it serving? I don't just produce an answer. It's always like, oh, what's happened to it, and so on. So I,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually think if you take a keen interest in the work that you're producing, you're not just handing things over at advice. You
Hmm.
actually, can have this build this relationship and an understanding of what your clients or your customers might need, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
treat it that way.
Yeah.
What?
And it's not
Oh
to
yeah,
say that, because there's lots of actuaries who work internally and, are really great at that technical work and quite
oh yeah,
enjoy,
absolutely,
doing the generation of
absolutely,
the
yeah,
results and that kind of thing too. So it's good that we've got different types of actuaries across the ecosystem,
absolutely, yeah,
across the
yeah.
profession.
No,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
mm,
No, I mean, the one thing that we probably share is our sort of tenacity, I think.
mm.
Yeah,
Well, we need that to get through our exams, don't we?
I
There,
think
I
that's
think there's a
right.
bit of a selection effect there.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right.
Yeah, wow. So you've really worked not just in different countries, but quite different cultures as well. I imagine
That's right.
growing up in Malaysia and riding your bike sound like quite an idyllic childhood,
It
actually.
was, yeah.
But then going from that to, going to Oxford and then New Zealand and the beauty of and the nature in New Zealand. I mean, you've quite a diverse experience.
Absolutely right. And
Mm.
all of it has been different and enjoyable and positive in many, many
Mm,
different ways.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, cultural influences on things like maths. So we're actuaries, STEM skills, maths skills are kind of at the heart of what we do. You've worked across different cultures, and I went to a selective high school, and there was sort of this assumption that Asian women, it was a girls' school, were better at maths than non-Asian women. And it kind of, I mean, it's always something that I've thought about, that influence of culture and how we see maths and how we teach maths and learn maths. What are your reflections on that, having worked across different cultures?
My question is, do you have a mother who makes sure you memorizes all your times table? That would be a typical Asian mother. So,
Wow. Well, you know what? I
yeah.
did actually. We,
Okay, well, there
we,
we go.
we had times tables on the back of the toilet door at home.
Perfect. Oh dear. So, well, I think it's a bit of both. Like it's both curriculum and culture.
Mm,
Or shall I say a lot of both. As you've said, like maths has been in the news a lot recently,
yes.
and there's all these concerns expressed about declining numeracy standards in Australia and New
Mm,
Zealand. And
mm,
every, OECD report tends to show Australia and New Zealand behind Asian countries like Singapore and
Yeah.
Japan and Korea and so on. So
Mm.
I'll give you a little bit about my first-hand experience, like that of my
Yeah.
own and my kids.
Great.
Though admittedly, this is a very small sample space, and so it's not going to stand up to actuarial scrutiny,
That's
but
okay.
it makes a good story. So I grew up learning maths in a typical public school in Asia,
Mm.
and my twins were born in Australia, and they're now at uni in Sydney in
Mhm.
UNSW. So they studied maths in this part of the world.
Okay.
So from my own experience, studying maths in Asia, I found there was more structured learning, and there was a huge emphasis on basics. So we learned addition, subtraction. We learned our times table by rote till there was instant
Okay.
recall.
Yeah.
And no one says, in an Asian country, I'm bad at maths. The focus is on effort rather
Right.
than innate talent. So you're
That's
not bad at it. If
interesting.
you put in the effort, you can do it. You know.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
yes. So whereas my kids, their maths education, they had more emphasis on storytelling,
Mm.
trying to make the numbers seem fun and relevant.
Okay.
I think there's room for both. But as I said, as an Asian parent, I took no chances. I
Yeah.
ensured my kids had solid grounding, memorized all their times table at home,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that they would then have the confidence to take on the fun stuff
Yeah.
later on. So I'll just
That's so
talk a little bit
interesting.
more about culture, Asian culture.
Mm.
Maths to Asia in Asian culture is like it's like breathing. You just do it, So it's analogous, I think, to probably Saturday sport here. It's
Ah,
part of the fabric of growing up in Australia and New Zealand.
yes.
So in Asian culture, maths is commonly accepted as a skill that you need for daily interaction.
Yeah.
So you'd go to like a hawker stall in the weekend, and there'll be a little kid there, 6 years old, helping out his parents. He's not at school at the time. And he'll just add up the price of 6, 7, 8 drinks that you've just served, within his head, and within seconds go 23.80, please, or whatever.
Wow.
Like no one
Wow.
even bats an eye. No one thinks, oh, he's smart or anything. It's just part of the
Just part of it.
fabric, yeah, of growing up. So
Yeah.
I think it's both curriculum and culture, I think, that influences mass ability. I think we need a consistent curriculum with
Mm.
solid grounding in the basics, but some flexibility for different
Mm. Mm.
types of learning. But I think to enhance culture around maths, those of us, especially females, that's you and me, Julia, I think
Yes.
we should talk about it a lot more, talk about our love for it. So it
Yes.
becomes part of our national psyche,
Yeah.
that to be a maths nerd is actually cool.
Yeah. Imagine, yeah. I mean, imagine if maths ability had the same status as, being a great soccer player or that
Absolutely.
Saturday sport. Yeah, it's sort of I
Yes.
love that analogy, Win-Li. And I also thought it was really interesting your reflection on that no one says I'm bad at maths. Because I feel
Yes.
like that really permeates, particularly my experience of Australian culture. When mean, I never thought of myself as bad at maths. I always thought of myself as good at maths. That was my strongest subject consistently. And people around me said, "Oh, you're good at maths. You're good at maths," even though most of my friends would say they were not good at maths.
Right.
But when my children were growing up as well here in Australia, I remember primary school teachers saying things like, "Oh, I'm not good at maths," and I would think, "Gosh, if the teacher is saying I'm not good at maths, what hope do we have for our children and for particularly for our girls growing up and seeing that role modeling?"
Exactly. It's you can it's almost like wearing it as a badge of honor. I'm bad
Yes,
at maths. I can't do it. I
yes,
I think we have to avoid that sort of language, I think.
yes, yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so the flip side of that is in a culture where nobody says that's just part of life. Being able
Yes,
to do
it's
maths, it's just an assumed part of what you can do.
yeah,
And
and
it's about
effort,
effort.
the effort. You might not have
Yeah,
the innate talent, but you
yeah.
you can get there with effort, and then it becomes fun when you can
Mm,
actually do it. You've put in the effort,
mm,
it becomes fun.
mm. Fascinating. Okay, so you think culture and curriculum both influence maths ability, and that
Absolutely.
there's things that we could do to sort of boost that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So, okay, so what about, I identified as maths being a strong subject for me, but I thought of myself as not good at English, not good at writing, not good at communication growing up. And to be honest, I thought there were two types of people that were good at maths and good at communicating. Now, Win-Li, I know you speak several languages, which I find so inspiring. Um, But I'm really curious to know, what has learning different languages taught you about communication?
Okay, I mean, I think the most important thing is language. When you speak different languages, it's not just words, it opens
Mm.
your mind to a whole different culture and way to engage. In
Mm.
fact, I think I'm a slightly different person when I'm speaking a
Different
different language.
person,
I'd have a,
really?
a different persona whether I'm speaking Chinese or English.
Wow.
I think what it does, it makes you think about the other person more and
Mm.
how you communicate in a way that they engage with.
Mm.
So, I went from a position where I spoke, Chinese at home and different dialects of Chinese, Cantonese to my mother, Hokkien, to my father's side of the
Wow.
family, going to a fully English speaking kindergarten, and then, doing all my primary education in Bahasa Malaysia, and then going to England, switching, completely to English, so I think, and if you count maths as another language,
Sure.
it's this wholesale changes and trying to think. You sort of take one step back and think, how can I communicate in a way that people, will relate to and understand? And it's
Mm.
quite different. And I read the news differently as well in
Do
different
you?
languages, different perspectives you
Mm.
you get from that. Um, I'll give you tell you a little bit an anecdote about my mother, I guess.
Yep.
When she's ordering roast duck, for example, in Cantonese from the duck vendor in Chinatown,
Uh-huh.
she doesn't do any of the polite, oh, may I please have some roast duck? It's like,
Mm.
roast duck, please. Make sure it's the best price and you're not cheating me, etc. Angry face.
Ah,
And
okay.
some retort from the duck vendor that appears like they're having an argument. But if you understand their words, you realize it's all, you know, jolly banter.
It's banter.
So yeah. So even though I do all my business in English now, like I think growing up thinking in all different languages, it's helped me appreciate how colorful the world, how colorfully the world operates, different
Mm.
ways people communicate, culturally where they're coming from, why they hold that point of view. And as a
Mm.
consultant, I think it's greatly helped me in drawing together all different perspectives, in finding like solutions that are workable,
Mm.
pragmatic, and, appeals to, different stakeholders.
Mm. Mm. That's really fascinating, Win-Li. And I think when it comes to communication, I think thinking about your audience and what they need is actually probably the first and foremost thing we need to do. No matter how we're communicating, whether we're speaking to them, what language we're speaking to them in, whether we're writing to them, but thinking about the audience. So it's really fascinating to me to hear that your reflection on speaking different languages has taught you about thinking about the other person and
Yeah.
considering
And
the
even
audience.
English, I speak English differently when I'm in Malaysia.
How
I
so?
have a different accent. Okay, let me try to do it. I mean, looking at you, I can only think of speaking to you in an English accent.
Okay.
I might say to my mother, "Oh yeah, don't want, don't want," means I don't want this. It's a
Okay.
don't want. But I'll say, "Oh no, thank you" to you, and not for this.
Right, right.
Rather than, don't wanna, it's okay,
Yeah. So
okay lah, and
different
things like that.
tone,
It's a
different
different tone,
vocabulary,
different
different
body language. Yeah,
pace, body
yep,
language. How
yep.
interesting. And so that goes back to what you were saying, that you maybe feel like you're a different person when you're speaking different languages because
That's
your
right.
whole
Yeah,
presentation is quite different.
that's right. That's right.
That's
Even
really
the
interesting.
different sense of humor, but having grown up and being immersed in that sort of environment of changing this way and that, it comes reasonably naturally, I guess.
Mm, mm. So, and you said that that's helped you as a consultant as well.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of just thinking about, what your client's looking for, or how to come across to your client.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking about it when I was preparing for this podcast,
Mm,
I actually consciously thought about it for the first time that my
really?
clients come from all over the world.
Ah,
I advise German insurers, Japanese, Kiwi, French, insurers from the north of England,
wow.
with operations to this part of the world. So I'm at a point to actuaries to all of these different cultures. And I think it must be because of my sort of interest and love of different cultures that has drawn these different types of insurers to me. So I was thinking, oh, of all the,
Mm,
my colleagues at Taylor Fry seem to be one who's picked up these sort of international clients, and I think I was
yeah,
just naturally drawn to them. But I hadn't really thought about it before until I was, preparing for this
yeah.
podcast, which we
Interesting.
agreed that I was going to talk about a multicultural journey.
Of course.
So yeah, so
And
my
maybe
work
those
has
clients are
reflected that.
attracted to you because of your multicultural journey and the, the differences that you've had there as well. It's
Well, hopefully
fascinating.
they are attracted to me, but they have me.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about culture, cultural impact on maths. We've talked about, various lessons from being able to speak different languages and what that means for us as consultants and what that means in terms of how we communicate differently. I want to touch on something that we're all familiar with, no matter which culture we come from, and it's our actuarial exam process. We often get quite focused on the end game without enjoying the process. There's not a lot to enjoy, to be fair, about
No, no.
working and getting through our actuarial exams. But I'm curious to know, with your multicultural lens, Win-Li, what impact do you think that has on our journey, that journey and focusing on the end point? What impact do you think that has on our careers?
Okay, first thing I'll put it out there. No one will say the actuarial exams were enjoyable. We were all focused on the end game.
Yep.
I mean, they did require a lot of effort and sacrifice to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So, but I think that looking back, that level of focus does something to the way you approach real world issues. The tenacity, as we mentioned, to stick at it, however complex, till you get a workable solution. So I
Mm,
think that tenacity is a much under heralded actuarial skill. Like employed actuary, they will get stuff done.
for sure.
That's
Yeah.
our tenacity, right? So when I mentor younger actuaries, which I do, I often get asked, what should I do next to progress my career and to open
Mm,
this door or that? And I sometimes think we focus so much on the finishing post that we
mm,
forget to enjoy the journey,
mm,
really knowing or finding what it is we're passionate about.
mm,
And
mm.
here's a secret, Julia, which you and I know, you never get to the finish.
So
So,
true.
I astound myself each day with how much I don't know, but it's less surprising. I don't know very much and
Yeah.
I'm still learning. So, I mean, the truth is, I always say to younger actuaries, your love and your enthusiasm for what you do is what will draw people to you and kick open the doors. So
Mm,
don't focus too much on the end game, enjoy the journey. Um,
mm, mm.
can I tell another anecdote
Of
about?
course, go for
Oh,
it.
okay. About growing vegetables. I've mentioned to you when we were prepping for this that I love growing vegetables.
Yep.
So my friends are always, laughing at me, saying by the time you spend like $100 on fertilizer, seeds, blah blah blah, using all that time,
Yep.
you're better off buying those vegetables in the supermarket.
Cheaper to buy them.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, much. Meat broccoli was like $20 and they're probably in season and cost $1 in the supermarket. But
Yep.
I think that misses the point. I mean, I think it's
Mm,
the journey more than the end game, the fun of
mm,
digging in the dirt, the fun of nurturing the baby plants to fruition, the
yep.
fun of eating your own vegetables. There's nothing
So
sweet.
good.
Yeah.
So good.
Although, having said that, my kids on their, I think, was it the 10th day of eating zucchinis, will disagree with me, I think, on it being nothing better than eating your own vegetables. I think they're scared of zucchinis, I think, up to this day.
Well, that the zucchini is the end game for them, I suppose. They haven't enjoyed the process that you've enjoyed, Winley, of
That's
nurturing the
right.
seedlings and growing the zucchini.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
No, I can definitely relate to that. That was actually the first thing I did after my last actuarial exam. I enrolled in a community college class on growing backyard veggies, and I was obsessed with it. And I still do
Are you
grow.
still growing them now?
I
Yeah.
still do. I think probably don't have as much land as you do. I think you've got quite a few crops growing, don't you? What are you growing at the moment?
Oh, it's winter, so I've I've just letting the land lie, put in some
Yes.
straw in it, dig it in and let it,
Yeah.
lie for a while. Yeah,
Replenish for next
replenish
time.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. No, it is. There's nothing like eating something that you've grown and picked from your garden, is there?
Absolutely, there's nothing sweeter. And then to be able to share it with all your neighbors and all that is even more enjoyable, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. And that comes back to what you were saying about connecting with people and yeah, sharing the joy and sharing the experience with others
That's
around you
right.
too. You're
Yeah,
able to give them some lemons and
yeah,
share
that's
the
right.
zucchini.
Yeah, I had about 400 lemons, I think, this year from three
Wow.
plants. So there we go.
Oh, amazing. Winley, it's been great talking to you today and hearing about not only your professional experience, but what you've learnt from such a multicultural and diverse experience living and working across the globe. So thank you for sharing your stories and reflections with us. I'd like to finish with one question, and it's this. What's your top tip for actuaries wanting to go on their own multicultural journey?
Okay, as you said, Julia, you don't need to leave your front doorstep. I think that a multicultural journey is a mindset rather than a physical journey. I'm ethnically Chinese, but I've been richly blessed by my interactions, and acceptances into so many different cultures. So I think most of the time, if you keep a lookout, culture comes to you. So in places like Sydney, where you live, which is a cultural melting pot, there's no excuse. I went to the Sydney Writers' Festival last week, and I
Mm.
heard and met a really inspiring British philosopher, A.C. Grayling, who was born in Zambia, and an Australian art historian studying in Cambridge, debate about whether we need books.
Wow.
So, culture comes to your
Comes to
doorstep if you
you.
keep your ears and eyes open. And I think the other thing I would say is if you're up for it, learning another language will really blow open your mind and it'll launch you well onto this glorious multicultural journey that you'll never look back from.
I'll take that advice personally to note. So thank you, Win-Li. Some great advice there that multicultural journey is about a mindset, and that if we open our minds, the culture comes to us. So thank
That's
you so
right.
much for sharing your stories today. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. Thanks,
And it's
Win-Li.
been and it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Julia.
Thank you.